been to Richmond, and that's about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're about an hour and a half from Richmond.
Okay, we are going live. And you wait one more minute. All right. Welcome everyone to this session of AAC in the Cloud. We will be focusing on, am I muted? Fostering effective self-advocacy in AAC users with Jaime Lawson, Melonie Melton, Heather Patton, and Melissa Clark, all speech-language pathologists at the New Horizons Center in Patton, Virginia, and they will introduce themselves in more detail and tell you about their approach to supporting psychosocial competence. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, well, thank you, and welcome to our session. I'm Melonie Melton, and you're going to see my colleagues shortly. First of all, I wanted to take care of a little bit of business. We do have a handout that's available of our slides and, more importantly, our resources. So everything we talk about, we have a resource for. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we will do our best to monitor the Slack channel and answer questions as we go along, but we will also look to our moderator at the end, and hopefully we've done our best. We're very passionate about this topic, but we've done our best to squeeze everything into time so that we will have enough time to answer questions or to get your comments, and more importantly, to give you a little break so that you can get ready for your next session. So hopefully that will all work out. So I wanted to review our learning objectives very briefly. What we want to do today is, first of all, we want you to be able to define psychosocial competence and its role in self-determination and self-advocacy. We'd like for you to be able to discuss at least 3 strategies that you can put into practice across the span of a school-age population to promote self-determination and self-advocacy in AAC users. And we hope that you'll be able to describe the role of social emotional development in promoting adequate self-determination and self-advocacy skills. So hopefully you'll be able to do all of those things at the end. First of all, a little bit about us. We are 4 speech-language pathologists who work for New Horizons Regional Education Centers. This is a regional public day program where we serve the 6 surrounding school divisions, just to name a few: Newport News, Hampton, Williamsburg, Gloucester, Poquoson. I think I'm leaving somebody out, but we're in Virginia, on the coast of Virginia. We have an elementary campus, a middle school campus, and a high school campus, and we serve students from age 5 all the way up through 22. New Horizons has a number of different programs, but the special education programs include a Center for Autism and EDID program, and we also have an ED program as well. We all work in the Center for Autism and EDID program, and what's most important to note is that all of those students have complex communication needs and use some form of AAC. So we are very passionate about AAC and what we do for the success of all of our students. I wanted to give a little bit of background for why we're talking about this, how we got into this. And I want to give some credit to this young man here. This is Earl. Earl is someone who went all the way through our program. I saw him a little bit in elementary school. I saw him a little bit in middle school. And then I came back to him at the end of his high school career about 3 years ago. And I was asked, to be involved in the interview process for him. He was going to interview for 2 positions within a local program that helps young adults, young autistic adults, with job coaching and placement and things like that. When he went through the interview process, or before he went through, what we thought about Earl is that he was one of our most successful AAC users, and we still think that he is. He uses an iPad with a communication app. Unfortunately, he did not get either of those jobs. And I was surprised. I was surprised at this outcome because we really view him, as I said, as a successful AAC user, but also as a very successful worker. He'd gone through our programs and he had done a really nice job. So it forced me to think about this process for him and all of our students. And I was surprised to learn, first of all, that he was not prepared for talking about think about the typical questions that are asked during an interview process, your opinions, you're asked to talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, things like that. He was not prepared to talk about those kinds of things. I was also surprised to see in a program like this that the interviewers were not familiar with AAC users. I think it didn't help. This was at the very beginning of using the virtual platform. And I think that probably didn't help him either. His AAC device, of course, was off camera. And I found that there were comments actually that they didn't quite believe that those were his thoughts, which was very concerning. All of this resulted in us as a team asking ourselves this question here: how are we actually helping make good transitions for our students? We really wanted to look into that and step back and look to see what we were doing. So the next year, we dove right into transition as a whole. We stepped back to look at transition, and these are evidence-based predictors of post-secondary success. The first one, inclusion, is something that we really kind of struggle with because we're a self-contained program, but we do have opportunities for inclusion that we, as a program, work to do. The other 2 occupational courses in work experience, I feel like we happen to have a very good transition specialist and a work program that started early. So we felt like our program really handles those parts of these predictors well. What we didn't feel like we were handling well and where we thought we could have the most impact was this last part: self-determination and self-advocacy. So that the next year, we decided to really dive into this area to hopefully have more success with our students. And I'll talk a little bit about, I'll give you a little reminder about communicative competence. For those of you who are in the field of AAC, you would be familiar with this. Communicative competence is our ultimate goal, of course, and that means that our AAC users can say what they want to say when they want to say it to whoever. Most people are familiar with these first 4 areas: linguistic, social, operational, and strategic. But this last area, psychosocial, is one that we felt that we weren't addressing as well. We weren't thinking about that. And you'll see how psychosocial competence has everything to do with self-determination and self-advocacy. Psychosocial competence addresses these 4 areas: confidence, motivation, attitude, and resilience. So we identified 5 specific areas where, as a program, we wanted to make sure we were tweaking a little bit or making major changes to hopefully improve the outcome for our students, especially in the area of self-advocacy and self-determination. So we are going to go through each of these. We're each going to take an area to go through. And I wanted to mention, of course, we don't have longitudinal data, but we do have some anecdotal data that we, or stories that we'd like to share throughout that lead us to believe that we are actually being successful or having some success in this area. So I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, Heather Patton, who's going to review access to robust communication system. So we're going to do some switching in chairs. So she's going to come on board.
Thank you, Melanie. So as Melanie said, we really have to start this journey by providing our students with access to robust communication systems. What you're seeing in this picture here is just an example of things that we have in place in every classroom. We have a single button voice output, we have pictures, we have a device that is a personal student's device, and we also are working on writing as well. So how did we make sure that each of our students has access to robust vocabulary? We started with making sure that they had access to core vocabulary. So we implemented a few years ago a Core Word of the Week program, and we started by targeting a single core word each week. We followed the Project Core research project out of UNC, and we followed their sequence for which core words to introduce each week in order. And then we provided weekly materials to our classroom teachers. So we provided a variety of activities that could be used to target the core word of the week. And then we focused on staff buy-in. The picture here is a picture of the staff at the middle school campus. We started by getting administrative support. It's really difficult to get anything done if you've ever worked in the schools if you do not have support from your administrators. So we started there. And then we got permission to provide motivating rewards, activities, and contests. And in this picture, what you're seeing is staff who have been recognized as modeling consistently in their classrooms. They have received what is referred to as a 30-minute coupon, which allows staff to leave 30 minutes early on the day of their choice. And then more recently, we started working on providing, focusing on core word combinations. So we transitioned from focusing on a single word to more word combinations. And then lastly, we made sure the accessibility was there. So we ensured that all students had their individual communication systems available to them. That included their backup systems if they had a high-tech system. That there was a classroom system available, which in our programs has been a Project Core poster of all the core words, as well as classroom pod books. And then we also engineered the building so that those things are accessible no matter where the student happens to be. So what makes a communication system robust? First, it must be multimodal. This is, everybody is probably familiar with this, so I'm going to go through it quickly. Whatever means that student chooses to communicate, we are going to honor that. So that includes vocabulary, it might be gestures, it might be mouth words, it might be a high-tech device with pre-stored messages. We also provide our students with access to letters. Because you never know what's going to come from that. And I'll share a story in a little bit. For them to have access to word forms, which includes grammatical markers, that it's organized in a systematic way, and that it has the ability to grow with the user. And so in this picture, you can see one of our students who has his high-tech device. That's the Proloquo to Go communication app. He has screenshots of that next to him, and he also has his textbook available as well. So within all of this, we really have examined what our role is in literacy, and struggled with, is our role to support the teacher, is our role to lead, and really kind of working that out based on what works best in each building, what works best in each classroom, and what each teacher is comfortable with. And then also, of course, considering what the students need. So the big takeaway there is collaboration. We spend our entire day collaborating with classroom teachers, with behavior specialists, making sure that our students are accessing what they need. So literacy, of course, is reading, it's phonemic awareness, it's phonological awareness, but it also includes writing in whatever way that works for our particular student. So we really emphasized with our teachers and staff that literacy can be incorporated into all instruction. It's not just during reading, it's not just during writing, it can be during math, it can be during history, during science. It should be happening all day. Reminding stakeholders that writing is a part of literacy, so that includes families as well, and familiarizing those stakeholders with alternative methods for writing. And then lastly, educating them that our students with complex communication needs can write, that there are no prerequisites. So in the pictures you see here, we have a student who has a dry erase board. And really what we do is kind of follow the student's lead and let them show us what they want to use. So he has written some letters here on his dry erase board. The middle picture is an adapted keyboard. I apologize, we have a jet going. We're very close to several military bases. So throughout the day, periodically, we hear jets flying over. So I'm going to give it just a second to get by, and then I'll go on. So this picture in the middle is a picture of a student with his high-tech device, which is also the Proloquo to Go app, but it also has access to a keyboard on the app. But in addition to that, we provided a hands-on keyboard that has removable letters, so that our students have another way to communicate. I had a very interesting situation with a student who we introduced one of these keyboards to for the first time. And this is a student who does use AAC. For him, it is a communication board. He does have mouth words that he uses as well. And when we presented him with the keyboard, he jumped up from his seat and started taking letters from his classmates' keyboards. And so we facilitated him asking that, and then stood back and watched. And what he did was use the letters to spell out the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And I said, "Oh, you watched that?" And he said, "Nene." And I am not a housewives. I don't watch most of the reality shows, so I was not familiar. I said, "Oh, you watch it with your grandma." And staff quickly corrected me and let me know that that was a character, a person on that show. And it was a fantastic moment because it allowed them to connect with him. And no one would ever have guessed that this 12-year-old boy was interested or watched Real Housewives of Atlanta, but he did. So how to make writing accessible? We work with our classroom teachers on predictable chart writing. That also comes from the Project Core research project. We make sure our students have access to device keyboards with word prediction. We use the adapted keyboards, as I mentioned before, and we also use alternative pencils. And whatever the predictable chart writing is for all of the students. We do that in all of our classrooms. And then the keyboards depends on what sort of system the student uses, whether they have access to that. My second story that I'll share is that if you've ever worked in a public school, and you have an experience where a teacher comes to find you in the middle of the day, which as you know, if you've worked in the schools, you know, we're between classrooms, between rooms, we're all over the place. So tracking us down can be difficult. So if a teacher tracks you down, you know it's something really terrible or it's something really good that you're about to hear. So I had a teacher track me down in another classroom to tell me about one of her students who also was a 12-year-old boy. He has a device with Proloquo to go. And this student has pica, so they have to be very careful what he has access to because they want to be sure that he's safe at all times. So he has a work area where they encourage him to stay within that work area. And this student kept getting out of his work area and pacing back and forth around the classroom. And his teacher came to tell me that this had happened. And she said to him, "What is it? What do you need?" And he went back over to his device and he opened up the keyboard and he typed out, "I want freedom." And this teacher said, "You know what, buddy, go ahead. You walk around the classroom if that's what you need to do." It was a really career-changing moment for her, I think. And when she came to tell me about it, I got goosebumps because, you know, we know that our students are smart, but they're not always able to communicate, self-advocate the things that they need. And in that moment, he was able to. So it was fantastic. It was a positive rather than a negative. I am now going to pass it over to Jaime Lawson, who will be talking to us about student choices and opinions.
Right. Thanks, Heather. So I will be talking about student choices and opinions and how that applies to self-advocacy and self-determination. This is one version of the Communication Bill of Rights, and this is truly what it's all built upon, what we've been talking about and what we will continue to be talking about. We as a team, we reference this all the time. All of our staff has a copy of one of the versions of the Communication Bill of Rights in their classrooms. And it's really helped us focus in on the students' needs and what they need to be able to prioritizing in the classroom. So how do we make this work? So first, we're going to look at self-acceptance. We as professionals working with the students, we want to make sure that we're modeling self-acceptance ourselves. And we can do that with the students' families, with their caregivers, and also with various staff that they work with. Second, we can do that with self-regulation. We can provide parallel talking as the student is working to regulate themselves, depending on whatever emotion that they're feeling. Also, we can make sure that we're providing visual and communication supports, and that they're engineered specific to a student and what their communicative needs might be. Also, we want to make sure that we are advocates for the student. So as much as we want them to self-advocate for themselves, we also want to make sure that they see us as advocates for them as well. So here are a set of questions that we want to make sure that we're considering. First, how are you helping students know their goals and actively meet their goals? So making sure that the students, their communicative needs and functional needs are being considered, and also including them in the generating of their goals. Are we being a team player? Making sure that we are accessing all the stakeholders, working with a specific student, and not always thinking of just who's in the building with the student, but who are team players outside of the school building. Are we using tools such as the Communication Bill of Rights to assess and develop self-advocacy for students? So again, it's a reference that we use all the time when we're working with our students. Are peers an active part of therapy? Are we pushing in and shaping group behavior? This is an area that we've been working more on this past year, including peers acting as an active communication partner in the classroom. So not feeling like we as the adult or the professional in the classroom needs to be the primary communication partner, but that peers can act as that as well. we want to make sure that we acknowledge and honor the opinions that our students share. We need to keep in mind that they might differ than what we have as a thought of our own, but we want to make sure that we acknowledge and honor, and we can do that with respecting what they share with us. We can also work to understand the why of what they've shared with us. So instead of just agreeing or disagreeing, we might want to take the time to delve into why they've expressed what they expressed. I have an example from this past year. We do an annual book fair at our campus in the fall and in the spring, and our students have the opportunity to participate in that. And one of my students, his dad had sent in some money with the anticipation that he would go down to the library and make some selections from the book fair. So I was asked to accompany him to the book fair. On the way there, we were talking about what we were going to do. I was using his communication system to express the expectation of, going and looking at books, making choices. However, not thinking that the route to the library is also the route that he takes to go to the sensory room. So once we got to the library, he did not stop. He kept going to the sensory room, expecting to have an opportunity to swing. So I honored that. Then thought, okay, well, on the way back, we'll try stopping at the library. And no, again, his routine was when I'm done in the sensory room, I go back to class. So there was no stopping at the library. So myself and the classroom staff, we took the time to sort of brainstorm how could we make adaptations to the book fair for this particular student. So I went down and there was a flyer of different books available. I brought that back and let him make some choices from there, and then brought those specific books for him to choose from. And again, I had to sort of step back and respect that he didn't want to go into the library. He wanted to go to the sensory room instead and come back, but it didn't mean that he shouldn't have the opportunity to participate in the book fair. We just had to adapt it for him. So making sure that we honor that, but also see how we can modify as needed. This is an example of phrases that we can provide to our students for different scenarios. This is from Teacher Pay Teacher. But we want to make sure that we provide examples of what our students can express in different situations that they might experience. So for example, we can let them know that it's okay to say that something's too loud. It's okay for them to tell us that they don't want to be touched, that it's okay to have the opportunity to do something independently versus us helping them. A lot of times I think there's a fear factor that we as professionals place on our students that they can't say these things. And we want to make sure that we provide a safe environment for them to express this and know that we will respect and honor it. This is a quote from Nancy Thaler that I'm going to read through. It states, "People with intellectual disabilities are generally taught from childhood up to be compliant, to obey, to go along with people. Because of the intellectual disability, people tend not to believe them, to think that they are not credible or that what they are saying, they are making up or imagining. And so for all these reasons, a perpetrator sees an opportunity, a safe opportunity to victimize people." So when it comes to self-advocacy, one of the most often starting points is refusal. So we want to make sure that we are teaching our students, just like the previous slide, how they can refuse and terminate things that they do not want to participate in. We want to also keep in mind the idea of, are we teaching our students to be more compliant than their non-disabled peers? And we want to make sure, just like Heather was stating earlier, that we're providing them adequate access to language and vocabulary to handle situations like this. I guess it's been in the last 2 years or so, year or two, that there was litigation that came out actually in our state of Virginia, Fairfax County Schools, related to restraint and seclusion. And it was actually the first time that we are aware of that communication was referenced in this type of litigation. 2 specific findings include that requires all students who use AAC to have their AAC available and have their hands free to use it where feasible. So having hands free is very key to note. And then second, requires that communication be addressed in the plan, and to reduce restraint and seclusion. So in their development of their behavior plan, working to make sure that restraint and seclusion is not something that is going to be the first route to address any type of behavior with the student. We've used this litigation that has come out to advocate for our students and also to educate our staff on how to make communication readily available with our students, and to make sure that communication is provided as an initial resort to address a behavior versus hands-on with the student. As Heather mentioned previously, a lot of our students use some form of multimodal communication. So we want to make sure that our students are aware of how to access and use all of their modes of communication, and that all of their communication partners honor each mode. So whether or not a student is using a high-tech system or not, that if they choose in a certain scenario to use their low-tech or no-tech system, or to use a form of writing, that is honored and respected over their high-tech system. Further, we want to make sure that we're considering equity, so that the modes of communication that our student uses is not doubted due to the one that they're accessing. All right, so when it comes to neurodiversity, we want to make sure that our students are developing self-awareness as well. We want to make sure that they're confident in expressing their preferences, which sometimes can be difficult given different scenarios and different communication partners. So we want to make sure that they're able to do so across different contexts. And we have also been working with our students this past year in them being more comfortable with the word autism and what that means to him or her. So defining the term, having them talk about their familiarity with it, which a lot of them don't usually acknowledge it related to their self. Sometimes it's related to others. So making sure that they have an understanding of what that word means and how it applies to them. Also, we've been working to make sure that self-advocacy is incorporated into our IEP goals. So I just have a couple examples to share with you. The first is, given access to AAC modalities and use of verbal speech, student will express emotion or feeling experiencing and advocate for what he needs to process or work through that emotion or feeling. And the second example is, the student will advocate for one's environmental and learning needs by initiating production of expanded utterances. So again, these are just two examples, and there's tons more that you could incorporate advocacy for within them. So now I am going to hand it off to Melissa Clark, and she's going to share with you about communication partner training and how that applies to self-advocacy and self-determination.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so I am going to briefly touch on our communication partner training and how we promote self-advocacy. What we like to do is make it a part of every treatment session. And we are able to do this because we use the push-in model for all of our groups and most of our individual sessions. So what we have been doing this year is we have been taking a communication bill of rights and presenting it in our sessions to the whole entire class. So that gives us the opportunity to talk to our students about it in front of all of the staff that works within that classroom. It also gives us the opportunity to model specific opportunities for students to advocate for themselves as they arise in the moment. And then it gives us an opportunity to provide some guided practice opportunities with the staff within the classroom. With specifically to this self-advocacy with the right to refuse or reject undesired actions, objects, or events, or even a choice, When we can, we like to tie these into the core word of the week that we're doing, because our staff is really familiar with that. We've already been doing that for several years. So I just wanted to share an example of what this looked like this past year within the classroom with one of my high school students. So what he tends to do is when somebody approaches him and he doesn't want to interact, he tends to swat at them or swat at any work that's presented, maybe even hit, kick, or close a mat around himself. You know, when I'm in the classroom, it gave me the opportunity to model with the staff how they can, you know, let him use his communication system. Oh, you're pushing me away. I think you want me to go away. Okay, sure, I can do that. No problem. And over time, I was seeing staff begin modeling that with him. And then by the end of the school year, he was initiating go all on his own, and everybody within the classroom was honoring that. So that was really exciting to see. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is how we use monthly Nearpods as trainings for our staff. So every month we would choose a communication bill of rights to focus on. And we really wanted to keep them really brief to stick with our, you know, buy-in of our staff. It provided for guided practice opportunities. We would present like, you know, a strategy that they could try, and then we'd have some little games or activities that they could do within the Nearpod. And then we were also able to create questions to make them think about how self-advocacy looks in the classroom, and especially with our students with complex communication needs, and, you know, answer questions about what was easy for you this week or this month in relation to promoting self-advocacy with these strategies. What was hard for you? And then it also provided opportunities to get some feedback to help us plan how we wanted to present our staff trainings for the following months. And then, of course, you know, to get our staff buy-in, we provide some incentives, some prizes. Some of us have offered candy, which they love. And then in our program, we've had the opportunity to offer 30-minute coupons so that staff can, you know, hand them in anytime they want and leave 30 minutes early for the day. So they really love that. That definitely motivates them to go ahead and do our Nearpods. All right, and so the next thing, I'm going to bring Melonie back on, and she is going to talk about the connection to role models.
All right, I'm back. I will be talking about our last two sections and then summing things up. This first one is connection to role models. And I want you to think back to the psychosocial competence that I spoke about at the very beginning, and think about all that's involved with psychosocial competence, the confidence, attitude, resilience, and motivation. Couldn't think of the last one. And think about this in terms of role models and how that might impact that area. One of the first things that we realized when we thought about connection to role models is that this is important, not just for students, but also for staff and families. And I have a story about that. And this is actually what made me really think about this. There was a young father of a young child. He was 5. He had just entered our program, an autistic student who was new to using AAC, and his family was new to the idea of AAC. And his father shared with me at his IEP meeting that when he learned his child was autistic and most likely, at least now, would not be able to use mouth words, would need to use an AAC system, he didn't feel that his son had a future. and he was very depressed about what would happen to his son. And he wasn't really paying attention to this AAC that we were talking about. But with television and streaming, he started to see characters on television. And I think I have had a picture in the slide before. I think the program was Speechless, and he mentioned that gave him hope. And it made him realize that there is a wide range of development, and that they all have, that he should presume competence in everyone, and that AAC was a viable means of communication. So he was much more willing to work with me. He saw hope for his child. So this is one good example where these positive role models that he saw just completely turned him around. I've highlighted a couple of ways that we have made connection to role models. I feel like this is an area that I want to do more with. I'm always in search of resources for connecting to role models. So I'm going to ask if any of you know any resources or any specific names. I would love it if you would write them in the Slack channel so that we all can have that, but that we can have it too. The first thing that I've highlighted, of course, is YouTube videos of first-person accounts. The names Chris Klein come to mind, wonderful, successful role model for our students and families and staff. Jordan Zimmerman is a young autistic lady that I'll mention in a few minutes. Those are two names that come to my mind. And then the next thing that I have highlighted is peer models in our classrooms. I mentioned early on at the very beginning, I talked about inclusion as being a predictor of success, and the fact that we have a difficult time with inclusion. But what we do well within our program is have peer models available, since everyone uses some form of AAC. But what we do is we keep that in mind, and we pair kids up and make sure that we have opportunities for them to talk to each other, so that we really utilize peer models within classrooms. And then I've already mentioned the television and streaming, providing access. I certainly hope that this hasn't been a fad, because I know like Speechless was canceled. But I hope to continue seeing role models within television and streaming. And then the last thing that I'll mention is a documentary called This Is Not About Me. If you haven't seen this, I highly recommend it. It's available on vimeo.com. I believe I paid like $9.99 to rent it for, I think it was about a month. It's about Jordan Zimmerman, who is an autistic young lady, and she talks specifically about her history of significant behavior difficulties and how those behavior difficulties were misinterpreted, and her lack of access to a robust communication system and how that impacted her. I attempted to show this to our entire program, but unfortunately we were caught up in the whole, we're asking too much of everyone when I was trying to show it. So they canceled all in-services, but I'm not going away. I'm definitely gonna show it again next year. So I strongly urge you to check out that video. All right, and the last section that I'll talk about is social emotional language development and the importance of that in self-advocacy and self-determination. In my practice before, I recognized that asking them how they felt was kind of important, but I didn't place a lot of priority on it. And when I did, I would give them the regular choices of happy, sad, mad. And I really didn't go much beyond that, unfortunately. Komochi's is a program, it was highlighted by the State Department Department of Education in Virginia, and they provided training, and it's marketed for, I think, mostly elementary age children. But we have used it at all levels. And Kamochis is a Japanese word for feelings. And these little characters over here are all the different feelings they have. And those have been very enticing to all of our kids. It's an organized program that we can use for social emotional vocabulary development so that we don't just have the choices of happy, sad, mad available to them. There is a cost for these cute little kamochis, and there are some other things, other characters too. But the other materials they've made available for free. And all of this is at kamochis.com. There are visual supports, and there are Google slide presentations and ideas for activities and all kinds of things. What we've done with it, what I changed about my practice is that I made it part of every single group session for all students. And unfortunately, I have to tell on myself and say that I wasn't doing this with all students before. And when I thought about it, I wasn't presuming competence at that point. I put this in every session for all students, and I've really enjoyed the outcome of that. It's been really good and taught me a valuable lesson that I should presume competence in everyone. Our teachers included in their morning meeting, and they did this in my campus without me even officially asking them to. They just saw how the students responded, and they started including this in morning meeting. They made a visual support available in classrooms. There's some visual support you'll see over here, and that just has 9, but there are actually a whole lot more. So there's different kinds of visual support. We also did a Kamochi of the week, where we would highlight a different emotion of the week, and we would connect that to whatever our theme was, or our core word of the week, or whatever. And this forced me to get past the happy, sad, mad that I was doing before. And I have a little poster at the top that says believe. And this is one of those little tweaks that we made that I think has been very powerful. When I talk about feelings with students, and I'm doing this for the purpose of staff to hear this too, what I say to them, I will ask them how they feel, and we believe what they say. It's typical in the past that someone would say, I feel happy. And a staff member might say, oh, no, you're not happy. You just threw that. You're mad. And we would tell them how they feel. But it's so important that we believe what they say. That's so important for self-advocacy, and for them to know that, to have the confidence to talk about their feelings. I also have a little term at the bottom called alexithymia, and I'm going to thank Rachel Dorsey, who is an autistic SLP, and I've listened to a bunch of her podcasts and things like that. And she talks about this. This is the inability to recognize an emotion within yourself. And she has indicated that there are many autistic individuals that are truly not able to recognize these emotions. So one of her recommendations is something else that I do, where I talk about emotions concretely. I might say, when I'm angry, my hands feel tight. I feel hot in the middle. And so I make it very concrete, and I just add that to what we're doing. And then we also use zones of regulation. And I think within the neurodiversity movement, there's been a little bit of negative press about zones of regulation. But there's a little tweak that we do with this too that I think is really important. In zones of regulation, students identify their zone, blue, green, yellow, red, or their readiness for learning before each session. And what we stress is that we don't tell a student what zone they're in. What I've heard in the past is, oh, you're in the red zone, or you're in the yellow zone because you're moving around. I stress to students and staff that you don't know what's on the inside of anyone. It's just like the emotions that I just talked about. A lot of times people don't know that I'm angry, although I think my colleagues might disagree with that a little bit. But you don't know. I might hide that I'm angry, and we have to assume that with our students too. So we believe everything that they say. And then the important thing for self-advocacy is this last question, which is, what do they need to be in the green zone? So this is where they get to practice advocating. I'm in the blue zone. I'm bored, or I'm tired. I need a walk, or whatever it is that they need. And then something has happened with this. We've done this for the last 3 years, and it's always really cool. At the beginning of the year, I always get, no matter what, I feel happy. I feel happy for everything. But towards the end of the year, and it happened again this year, I start to get, I feel brave, I feel hurt, I feel silly. I start to hear different words, and that helps our staff engage with them, and helps and really shows me that this is working, that they're able to advocate for themselves. So in summary, these are the 5 areas that we identified in which we can make some tweaks, some simple tweaks, or some major changes where we are hoping to see changes in self-advocacy and self-determination. Our anecdotal evidence that we have suggests to us that we are making some changes. So what we hope for you is that you've left with some concrete things or ideas that you can do, but also, I think more importantly, that you realize that this self-advocacy and self-determination needs a higher place in our priority with our caseload, our students. So that's it. And we thank you so much for coming, and we'll open it up for some questions if there are any that haven't been addressed.
Well, thank you, team. What a great presentation, and so many aspects to build psychosocial competence, which I think is a new concept for many of us, and so many parts to this. So thank you for all the resources. I think this introduces a holistic and comprehensive way to support AAC users, as we all believe in self-determination, but doing it every day the way you do is really admirable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.